nebula is a big cloud of gas and dust. Some of them are places where new stars are being born, others are the remnants of dead or dying stars. They come in so many shapes and sizes and have incredible colors. They're among the most visually stunning objects in the night sky. Let me show you 3 of the most famous nebula, and then we're going to make our own nebula art using a paint pour. The Orion Nebula, or the Messier object number 42, is visible to the naked eye as a fuzzy patch in the middle of the sword in the Orion constellation. It's more than 1,000 light years away from Earth, and it's full of stars being formed and protoplanetary disks, which are planets being formed, basically the start of solar systems. The nebula is huge. It's 24 light years across. That's so big, you could line up more than a dozen of our solar systems and they wouldn't even reach all the way across the Orion Nebula. The Horsehead Nebula, also known as Barnard 33, is a dark nebula. Dark nebulas don't emit or reflect very much light. Instead, they're visible to us because they block some of the light from objects behind them. The nebula behind the Horsehead Nebula is the emission nebula IC 434. This one is pretty bright because of nearby stars, and the contrast between the 2 nebulas is what creates the stunning Horsehead Nebula. Now, the Crab Nebula, or Messier object number 1, it's more than 6,000 light years from Earth in the constellation of Taurus, and it's the remnants of a supernova. At its center, it has a pulsar, the collapsed core of the star, which is spinning at 30 times per second and emitting pulses of radiation. The pulsar acts kind of like the light in a lighthouse. Its beams of energy light up the gas and the dust in the nebula. The colors you see in the Crab Nebula all depend on which type of light you're looking at. You'll get different colors depending on the wavelength. And now we're going to make our own nebula-themed art project. But I should say, if you're like Math Dad, you might want to skip this project. It's definitely a messy project. So first, lay down some newspaper or cardboard because paint will be dripping off your canvas and you don't want to get it on furniture or the floor. Next, get a small paper cup. The size of cup you'll need depends on the size of your canvas, but I'd recommend these small 3-ounce cups. When they're about halfway full, that's a good amount of paint for a 4 by 6 inch canvas, and if you have an 8 by 8 inch canvas, then you want to fill the cup up most of the way. If you have craft paint that is already fairly runny, then you can use it just as it is. But if you have acrylic paint that comes in the little tubes, you'll want to thin it with glue and water by mixing about 3 parts glue to 1 part water and then mixing that with paint. To fill up your cup, you're going to want to layer your colors, and you can layer them in any order you want. To get something that looks more like a nebula, I'd recommend using plenty of black or dark purple or dark blue with occasional spots of yellow, pink, or white as you're layering. For my art pieces, the only colors I had were blue, purple, black, and yellow, so that's what I used. Once you've filled your cup up with different layers of paint, then it's time to pour. And you don't have to use a blank white canvas. You could pour this over an old canvas that you had already painted a picture on. If you pour your paint all the way in the center, then your colors will mix a bit more and be a little more muted. You could also pour it into a diagonal, a zigzag, or a spiral. After you've poured out most of the paint, tap the cup at the corners. The corners can be the trickiest to cover, and it really helps to have a little bit of wet paint on each of the corners before you start tipping the canvas. Now, in my opinion, is the fun part, or if you're Math Dad, the anxiety-inducing part. You're going to slowly tip your canvas and let the paint spread out. This video footage you see is sped up. In real life, you need to be patient because this takes a while. Tip it one direction, and then another, and then another. You want to keep tipping until you've covered the entire canvas, and for best results, you want to let the extra paint drip off the edges. You don't want a thick puddle of paint in the middle when you're done. You want the paint to be all spread out. Keep tipping until you're satisfied with how it looks. And there are no rules with this. If you end up with a striped pattern and you wanted swirls, you can just add swirls like I did here, and then as you tip, the shapes will change, which is pretty fun to see. Here is how my pieces looked. Pouring paint all into the middle made this. And here's the one where I added a spiral in the middle. Once you're done, set the canvas on parchment paper or newspaper so it can dry, and wash your hands so that you don't spread paint around by accident. It's going to need to dry for hours. We'd recommend leaving it overnight before you touch it or pick it up again. We hope you enjoyed this lesson on nebulas. It really is amazing what variety of colors we see in the night sky from just clouds of dust and gas. It's also incredible to think about how spread out they are too. A nebula the size of the Earth would be made of just a few kilograms of gas and dust particles. But when those dust particles are all spread out and energy from nearby stars is making them glow, oh my goodness, they're gorgeous. And nebulas are also a huge part of the life cycle of stars. And we also hope you enjoyed learning a new art technique. Paint pouring is a lot of fun because the end result is always a surprise.
But it's also kind of messy, so I really hope we don't do this again too soon.
Whether you love paint pouring or not, we would love to see your nebula art. You can send a picture to scienceart@science.mom, or you can tag us on social media. Work hard, grow smart, and we'll see you again soon.